Welcome back to the deep dive. We're digging into your sources today, pulling out those key insights.
That's the plan.
And today, it's all about a really interesting molecule, palmitoylethanolamide. PEA, for short.
PEA, yeah.
Yeah.
You shared some great stuff on its kind of wild history and what it might do, especially for the brain.
It really is a surprising journey. Found in egg yolks, back in the 50s?
That's right. Then a little flicker of interest in the 70s, maybe for flu.
Uh-huh. And then it just disappeared for ages.
Pretty much fell off the map research-wise for decades, until recently.
So that's our mission here. Understand PEA based on these sources, where it came from, how it seems to work, why it's suddenly back, and, what the evidence actually suggests for these tough brain conditions. Okay, so let's start with that history. The sources seem to say it's pretty important for understanding the present.
Definitely.
They knew it did something positive back then, like maybe helped with rheumatic fever or flu symptoms, but the research just stopped because they didn't know the how.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
The observations were there, but the science back then really wanted a clear target, like a specific receptor for a drug.
And PEA didn't fit that mold?
Nope. No clear mechanism they could pin down. So
Yep.
the funding, the interest, it just faded. Forgotten for about 20 years.
Right. And then the sources point to Nobel laureate Rita Levi-Montalcini in the 90s. Her work seems to be the turning point.
Absolutely pivotal. She discovered PEA is what's called an aliamide.
Aliamide. Okay.
It stands for autocoid local injury antagonist. Basically, it means it's something your own body makes right where it's needed when tissue is stressed or inflamed.
Ah, so it's like your body's own rapid response team for calming things down locally.
Precisely. Think of it like that, yeah. It helps restore balance. It doesn't just attack one thing. It influences key cells involved in inflammation, like mast cells and microglia.
Microglia, those are the brain's immune cells, right? Can
Right.
get overactive.
Exactly. And a major way PEA works is by activating something called PPAR alpha. It's a receptor inside the cell nucleus that acts like a genetic switch to turn down inflammation.
Okay.
And there's another cool thing. It indirectly helps your endocannabinoid system, the body's own cannabis-like system for balance.
Right, anandamide and things like that.
Yeah. It boosts beneficial endocannabinoids like anandamide, kind of an entourage effect, but without hitting the main cannabinoid receptors that cause psychoactive effects.
That's fascinating, a natural, multi-pronged approach. But the sources also stress a big problem. The PEA molecule itself isn't easily absorbed.
That was the major roadblock. It's very fatty, lipophilic, which makes it hard to get into the bloodstream and tissues effectively when you take it orally.
So the early promise just couldn't translate.
Not easily, no. That's why the recent stuff is so different. It's all about the formulation. Things like ultramicronization, grinding it super, super fine. That's PEA.
Right, PE.
And also combining it with other helpful compounds like the antioxidant luteolin. That gives you PEALUT. These new forms actually get absorbed. They make it bioavailable.
So the molecule can actually get to where it needs to go, including the brain.
Exactly. That's the key to the modern research and the results we're starting to see.
Okay, so we have this natural molecule now in forms the body can actually use. What are these sources telling us about what it might do for those really difficult neurodegenerative diseases?
Well, the evidence picture is still developing. It varies a bit, but some of the findings you shared are, frankly, quite remarkable, especially given the lack of options for many of these conditions.
Like frontotemporal dementia, FTD.
Yes. There was a proper placebo-controlled trial mentioned using PELUT, and it found PEAEUT slowed the progression of the disease by more than 50% over, I think it was 24 weeks.
Wait, slowed it by over half compared to placebo?
That's what the source reported, yeah. The severity score got significantly worse in the placebo group, as you'd expect, but only about half as much worse, or even less, in the PEALUT group. For FTD, which has 0 approved treatments, that's potentially huge.
Huge is right. Wow, okay, what about Parkinson's disease?
There was an observational study with PEA. Now, observational means you can't draw a firm cause and effect. But it reported something really unusual.
Which was?
An improvement in the Hone and Yar score after a year. That's the standard scale for Parkinson's severity.
An improvement. Not just slowing, but things actually getting better on the scale.
That's what was reported. Patient scores actually decreased. Now, needs confirmation in controlled trials? Absolutely. But seeing potential improvement in Parkinson's severity scores, Well, it's not something you typically see.
No kidding. And mild cognitive impairment, MCI, there's a note on that.
Yeah, just a single case study, so we have to be cautious. But it reported cognitive normalization with PEAlu.
Getting back to normal thinking.
And incredibly, the source mentioned normalized brain metabolism seen on a SPECT scan after 9 months. One case, but objective brain imaging backup is very interesting.
Definitely compelling, even as a single case. And
Sure.
ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease.
For ALS, the sources mentioned preliminary data. It suggested PEA might delay some really severe outcomes, specifically needing a tracheotomy or death.
Delaying those critical points in such a devastating disease.
Any potential delay there is obviously incredibly meaningful.
What about the big one, Alzheimer's?
There, the sources focused on strong lab and animal data, showing PEA could rescue memory problems, reduce amyloid and tau, calm brain inflammation in those models. Very promising preclinically.
But not human trial results for Alzheimer's in these particular sources.
Correct. That was highlighted as a gap. Human clinical trials for PEA, specifically in Alzheimer's, are still needed, based on what you shared.
Okay, so promising signals in several tough areas, though at different stages of evidence. One thing that comes through again and again in these sources is the safety.
Right. That seems to be a really consistent theme. Across different studies, thousands of people involved overall, PEA just shows a remarkable safety profile.
Very few side effects reported.
Extremely few, and usually very mild if they do occur. It seems to work with the body's own systems, enhancing protection rather than forcing a pathway like many drugs do. That likely contributes to why it seems so well tolerated.
It makes sense. So the sources are absolutely clear. We need more large-scale, rigorous trials to really confirm these effects, especially for things beyond that FTD trial. No question.
Absolutely. Confirmation is key.
But it does leave you as a pretty interesting thought, doesn't it? Well, if a molecule that seems to just boost your body's own protective mechanism, something with such a strong safety record over thousands of users, if that can potentially lead to these kinds of, well, remarkable outcomes we've discussed, slowing FTD by half, maybe improving Parkinson's scores, normalizing function in that MCI case, delaying ALS endpoints, what does that suggest? What might that tell us about, new ways we could approach treating these incredibly complex neurodegenerative diseases in the future? Something to think about.